Sign the papers already, Ethan. You've got nothing I want. That's what Clara hissed at me across the polished oak table in the judge's chambers. I should have seen it coming when she began working late 3 nights a week, always on urgent client presentations. But you know what they say about love. It doesn't just blind you, it makes you stupid. For 8 years, I'd been the devoted husband, the steady provider, the guy who fixed leaky faucets and never forgot an anniversary. To Clara, though, I was just Ethan Lai, the boring software engineer earning $90K and driving a beat-up Honda Civic. What she didn't know was that boring Ethan had been quietly building something extraordinary. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Clara was out networking with Adrian Blake, yeah, I knew his name even then, I was sitting in our modest suburban kitchen monitoring cryptocurrency wallets that held more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. My stake in Cypher Shield, the blockchain security startup I'd been nurturing since college, had exploded beyond my wildest projections. $73 million and counting, to be exact. But Clara saw none of it, because I'd made a conscious choice to live like the middle-class software engineer she believed I was. Call it a character test. Call it paranoia. Call it the smartest financial decision I ever made. The first real crack in our facade happened on a Tuesday in March. Clara breezed through the door at 11:47 p.m. I remember because I was tracking her patterns by then, with that post-guilty conscience glow that cheating spouses think they can hide. Her lipstick was gone, her hair slightly mussed, despite her attempts to fix it in the car, and she smelled like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "Another late client meeting?" I asked from the couch, not looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing Cypher Shield's quarterly projections. She paused, just for a fraction of a second, but I caught it. You know how demanding the Morrison account is. They want everything perfect for the product launch. The Morrison account. Right. I'd called her office earlier that day. Morrison had been wrapped up for 2 weeks. "Must be exhausting," I said, finally meeting her eyes. "All that networking." Something shifted in her expression then, a flash of annoyance that she quickly masked with fake concern. "Ethan, are you feeling okay? You've been acting weird lately." Weird. That's what 8 years of marriage gets you. The moment you stop being a doormat, you're acting weird. But I played along, because I was still gathering evidence, still hoping maybe I was wrong. Just tired, I guess. Work's been crazy. She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes and headed upstairs. "Right, your little coding projects. Well, some of us are trying to build real careers." Little coding projects. If only she knew that my little coding project had just secured a Department of Defense contract worth $12 million. The real gut punch came 3 weeks later at Tom's barbecue. Tom Reyes had been my best friend since college, one of the few people who knew about Cypher Shield's success, and he was throwing his annual spring gathering. Clara had initially begged off, claiming she had plans with her sister, but showed up anyway around 8 p.m. with some excuse about plans falling through. Except her sister, Jenny, lived in Portland. I'd checked. I was manning the grill, flipping burgers and pretending to listen to Mike from accounting drone on about his fantasy baseball team, when I spotted them. Clara was in the corner of Tom's backyard, partially hidden by the big oak tree, talking animatedly on her phone. But it wasn't the conversation that made my blood cold. It was what I overheard when the wind shifted. "No, he's completely clueless. Stuck grilling like the good little suburban husband. Adrian, you should see him. It's actually pathetic." The burger patty sizzled and popped, fat dripping into the flames, but all I could hear was my wife's voice dripping with contempt as she described her boring husband to her lover. The man she was planning to leave for someone more successful, someone who could give her the lifestyle she deserved. Tom appeared beside me with 2 beers, took one look at my face and followed my gaze to where Clara was laughing at something Adrian had apparently said. "Brother, you okay?" I took the beer with hands that weren't quite steady. "How long have you known?" "Known what?" But he knew exactly what I meant. About Clara and Adrian Blake. Tom was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. Jenny mentioned seeing Clara at the Ritz-Carlton bar last month, with some guy in an expensive suit. I didn't want to be the one to... The Ritz-Carlton. While I was home doing dishes and reviewing security protocols for a system that protected half the Fortune 500's cryptocurrency transactions, my wife was sipping champagne with a real estate broker who drove a leased Maserati. "What do you know about Blake?" I asked, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. Tom glanced around, making sure we weren't overheard. "He's all flash, man. Drives expensive cars, wears designer suits, but word is he's leveraged to the hilt. Big reputation, bigger debt. The kind of guy who looks successful until you peek behind the curtain." I flipped the burgers, watching the flames dance. And Clara doesn't know that. Clara sees the surface. She always has. Tom paused. "Ethan, what are you gonna do?" That was the million-dollar question, or in my case, the $73 million question. I could confront her right then, create a scene that would become suburban legend. I could file for divorce immediately, shock her with the wealth she'd never suspected. Or I could do something smarter. I could let her hang herself. "I'm going to give her exactly what she wants," I said finally. Tom raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "The chance to show me just how little our marriage means to her." Clara ended her call and sauntered back toward us, all smiles and fake innocence. She slipped her arm through mine with the casual affection of a woman who had just finished making plans to betray the man she was touching. "Sorry about that, honey. Work emergency." She looked up at me with those green eyes that had once made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Now they just looked calculating. "You know how it is." "I'm starting to." She missed the double meaning entirely, already scanning the crowd for more important people to schmooze. That was Clara, always networking, always climbing, always looking for the next rung on the social ladder. What she didn't realize was that she was about to fall off the ladder entirely. The next morning, I called Naomi Park. Naomi Park had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce court, which is exactly why I wanted her on retainer 3 months before I'd need her services. When I walked into her downtown office that Wednesday morning, she took one look at me and poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. "You look like a man who's discovered something he wishes he hadn't," she said, settling behind her desk with the kind of directness I'd come to appreciate during our business dealings with Cipher Shield's legal matters. I told her everything. The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the contempt in Clara's voice at Tom's barbecue. Naomi listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, her expression growing more focused with each detail. "So you want to file for divorce," she concluded when I finished. "Not yet," I leaned forward. "I want to be prepared when she files." Naomi's eyebrows shot up. "You think she's going to file first?" "I know Clara. She's not going to keep living a double life indefinitely. She's going to want to make the move to Adrian, but she'll want to make sure she gets her fair share of what she thinks I have first, which she believes is a middle-class software engineer's modest savings and half a suburban house." I smiled grimly. She has no idea about Cipher Shield. Naomi set down her coffee cup with a soft clink. "Ethan, you're talking about $73 million in hidden assets. That's complex. Not hidden. Protected. Everything was acquired before and during marriage, but through entities and structures she never had reason to know about. I never lied to her about money. I just never volunteered the full scope of my success." "That's a very important distinction," Naomi agreed. "But if she files first, she might try to claim you deliberately concealed assets." "Let her try. I have 8 years of documentation showing that I lived consistently with the income she believed I had. I never made unexplained purchases, never lived beyond our apparent means. If anything, I was supporting her lifestyle on what she thought was a $90K salary." Naomi was quiet for a moment, then smiled, the kind of smile that made her one of the most feared divorce attorneys in the city. "You've been planning this for a while."
I've been protecting myself since I was 25 and watching my buddy Mike get cleaned out by a woman who married him for his software company stock options. I stood up. I don't want revenge, Naomi. I want justice. And I want Clara to understand exactly what she threw away. 3 weeks later, the opportunity presented itself in the most humiliating way possible. I was working from home, deep in code review for Cypher Shield's latest security update, when I heard Clara's key in the front door. She wasn't supposed to be home for hours. She'd claimed another late client dinner. But there she was at 2:30 in the afternoon, laughing and whispering to someone on the phone. No, he's working from home today, but he'll be glued to his computer for hours. Yes, Adrian, I'm sure. He never comes upstairs during the day. My blood went cold. She was bringing Adrian to our house, to our bedroom. I sat frozen at my desk, listening to her footsteps on the stairs, followed by heavier ones that definitely weren't hers. The sound of our bedroom door closing, then 20 minutes later, sounds that no husband should ever have to hear coming from his own bed. I could have stormed upstairs, could have kicked down the door and confronted them both. Instead, I did something that would serve me much better in court. I recorded everything. The audio was crystal clear through our thin walls, Clara's voice, Adrian's deeper tones, and conversations that made it very obvious this wasn't their first time in my house. They were comfortable, familiar, discussing plans that stretched months into the future, plans that involved Clara leaving her loser husband for a man who could give her the life she deserved. "When are you going to tell him?" Adrian asked during what I assumed was their post-betrayal pillow talk. "Soon. I just need to figure out how to maximize what I can get from the divorce. He might be boring, but he's got decent savings, and half this house is worth something." Adrian laughed. "Baby, once you're with me, money won't be an issue. I've got 3 deals closing this quarter that'll set us up for years." If only he knew that his 3 deals were probably worth less than what I made in Cypher Shield dividends every month. They stayed for 2 hours. 2 hours in my bed, in my house, planning my destruction when I sat downstairs documenting their every word. When they finally left, Clara claiming she needed to run errands and would be back by dinner, I immediately called Naomi. "I have them," I said simply when she picked up. "Audio?" "Everything. Dates, times, detailed conversations about their affair and her plans for the divorce. She even mentioned specific assets she intends to go after." "Ethan, I need to ask," Naomi said carefully, "did you obtain this recording legally?" "They were in my house, having an affair in my bed, discussing plans to defraud me in divorce court. I recorded audio in my own home of people who had no expectation of privacy while committing adultery." "That'll work," I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "When do you think she'll make her move?" I didn't have to wait long to find out. Clara came home that evening with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of wine, the expensive kind she usually reserved for special occasions. She was unusually affectionate during dinner, asking about my day, complimenting the software project I was allegedly working on, even suggesting we watch a movie together. It was the kind of evening that might have fooled me 3 months ago. Now it just felt like a performance by someone working up the courage for something big. The shoe dropped the next morning over coffee. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said, setting down her mug with the kind of finality that precedes life-changing announcements. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing Cypher Shield's latest patent filings. "About what?" She took a deep breath, and I saw her slip into what I'd come to recognize as her professional presentation mode. Shoulders back, chin up, practiced sincerity. "We've grown apart, Ethan. We want different things. You're content with this," she gestured around our kitchen dismissively. "But I need more. I need someone who shares my ambitions, who wants to build something bigger." Someone like Adrian Blake, she meant. Someone with a Maserati and expensive cologne, and absolutely no idea that the boring software engineer he was cuckolding could buy his entire real estate brokerage with pocket change. "I see," I said. "And you've thought this through?" "I have." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "These are divorce papers." She slid the envelope across our breakfast table like she was closing a business deal. Inside, I knew, would be her attorney's assessment of our marital assets, the house, my supposed savings account, maybe even a claim on what they thought my modest 401k was. What wouldn't be in there was any mention of Cipher Shield, blockchain security patents, or $73 million in carefully structured assets. "Clara," I said carefully, "are you sure this is what you want?" For just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe? Or guilt? But then her phone buzzed with a text message, and when she glanced at it, her resolution hardened. Adrian, no doubt, checking on her progress. "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I've already moved some of my things to a friend's place. I'll be staying there while we work out the details." A friend's place, right. I opened the envelope and scanned the documents. Clara's lawyer had done a thorough job cataloging what they believed to be our assets. They'd estimated my net worth at roughly $340,000. The house, savings, retirement accounts, even my Honda Civic. She was asking for half of everything, plus alimony, plus her legal fees. She was so confident, so certain she held all the cards. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "There's just one thing I don't understand," I said, looking up from the papers. "What's that?" "If you've been unhappy for so long, why didn't you talk to me about it? Why jump straight to divorce papers?" Clara's composure slipped just slightly. We just grew apart, Ethan. These things happen. Or maybe you found someone else." The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Adrian Blake. Real estate broker, drives a silver Maserati, spends a lot of time at the Ritz-Carlton bar." Clara's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Finally she managed, "How did you—" "The same way I know you brought him to our house yesterday afternoon. The same way I know you've been planning this divorce for months to maximize what you can take from our marital assets." She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "You're spying on me?" "I was protecting myself from a wife who was planning to betray me." I closed the divorce papers calmly. "The question now is whether you want to do this the easy way or the hard way." Clara's shock was rapidly transforming into anger. "The easy way. Ethan, I'm taking half of everything you have. That's not negotiable." I smiled then, probably the first genuine smile I'd had in months. "Clara, you have no idea what I have."
The look on Clara's face when I said those words was almost worth 8 years of marriage to a woman who saw me as a stepping stone. Almost. "What's that supposed to mean?" she demanded, but there was uncertainty creeping into her voice now. For the first time since she'd slid those divorce papers across our breakfast table, Clara looked like she wasn't entirely sure she was in control. I stood up slowly, gathering the documents. "It means you might want to have your lawyer do a more thorough investigation before you start making demands about marital assets?" "Ethan, you're a software engineer who makes $90,000 a year. I know exactly what you have because I've been living with it for 8 years." But she was studying my face now, looking for tells, and I could see the first seeds of doubt taking root. "Have you," I asked, "been living with it, I mean, or have you been living with what I chose to show you?" Clara's phone buzzed again. Adrian, probably wondering why her meal ticket was taking so long to secure the bag. She glanced at it, and I saw her jaw tighten with renewed determination. "You know what, Ethan? You can play whatever games you want. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half of our marital assets, and that's what I'm going to get, whether you want to cooperate or not." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then turned back with the kind of cruel smile I'd never seen on her face before. "By the way, I'll be staying with Adrian until this is settled. His penthouse has a much better view than this place." The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows.
I sat back down at the kitchen table and speed-dialed Naomi. "She took the bait," I said when she answered. "Divorce papers served?" Hand-delivered with a side of arrogance. She's confident she knows exactly what she's entitled to, and she's already moved in with Blake. I paused. Naomi, she has no idea what's coming. Good, that works in our favor. The more confident she is about what you're worth, the bigger the shock when we reveal the truth. Have you reviewed their asset assessment? I flipped through Clara's lawyer's paperwork again. They've got me pegged at about $340,000 in total assets. They want half, plus alimony, plus legal fees. Naomi laughed, actually laughed. They're asking for $170,000 from a man worth $73 million. Oh, Ethan, this is going to be fun. Over the next 6 weeks, Clara made sure everyone in our social circle knew she was the victim of a failed marriage to an unambitious man who couldn't give her the life she deserved. She'd show up at neighborhood gatherings with Adrian in tow, making sure everyone saw his expensive watch and heard about their weekend trips to wine country. The performance was flawless. Clara played the role of the long-suffering wife who'd finally found the courage to pursue happiness with a real man, someone who understood her worth. Adrian played the successful businessman who could provide the lifestyle Clara had been denied. What they didn't know was that I was documenting everything. Every public appearance, every social media post showing off their expensive dinners and luxury hotel stays, every comment Clara made about my limitations as a provider, all of it went into the file Naomi was building for court. "She's making our case for us," Naomi observed during one of our strategy meetings. "Every post she makes about Adrian's success, every comment about your supposed financial inadequacy, it all supports our narrative that she left the marriage for financial reasons. And when the judge discovers what those financial reasons really were, that's when we win everything." The most surreal part was watching Adrian Blake try to play the magnanimous victor. He actually approached me at the grocery store one Saturday afternoon, all fake sympathy and barely concealed smugness. "Ethan, right? I'm Adrian Blake. I want you to know there are no hard feelings here. Sometimes these things just happen." I shook his hand and smiled politely. "No hard feelings at all, Adrian. Actually, I'm curious about something. Clara mentioned you're in real estate?" His chest puffed up with professional pride. "That's right. Commercial properties mainly. High-end developments. I've got 3 major deals closing this quarter alone." "Impressive. Must be a good market for someone with your expertise." "It is if you know how to play the game." He glanced around the grocery store with obvious disdain. "Some people are content with simpler lifestyles, but Clara deserves better than that." I nodded thoughtfully. "She certainly thinks so." "Well, I hope those deals work out for you, Adrian. I imagine you're counting on them." Something flickered in his eyes at that last comment, but he recovered quickly. "Oh, they'll work out. They always do when you know what you're doing." We parted ways in the cereal aisle, and I immediately called Tom. "Can you do me a favor and run a background check on Adrian Blake's business?" I asked. "Looking for anything specific?" "Everything. Debt-to-income ratios, property values, pending deals, credit history, the works." Tom's research came back 3 days later, and it was even better than I'd hoped for. Adrian Blake was indeed working 3 major deals, but he was also leveraged beyond belief. His flashy lifestyle was funded entirely by credit and the assumption that his pending sales would close. If even one of those deals fell through, his entire house of cards would collapse. "Get this," Tom said over coffee at our usual spot. "The Maserati, leased. The designer suits, credit cards. The penthouse Clara's living in, He's 3 months behind the mortgage. And Clara has no idea? Clara sees the surface, just like always. But Ethan, there's something else. Word is, one of his major deals is already in trouble. The financing fell through last week, but he hasn't told the clients yet. I felt a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. Clara had left her stable, devoted husband for a man whose success was as much an illusion as my failure had been. The irony was perfect. 2 weeks later, I got the call I'd been expecting. "Ethan, it's Naomi. Clara's lawyer wants to schedule mediation. They're pushing for a quick settlement." How quick? They want everything wrapped up within 30 days. Apparently, Clara's eager to move on with her new life. I thought about Adrian's financial collapse and Clara's oblivious confidence in her upgrade. Let them push. The more eager they are to settle, the less thorough they'll be in their due diligence. Agreed. But Ethan, once we go into mediation, we'll have to start revealing assets. Are you ready for that? I looked around the modest suburban house where Clara and I had spent 8 years of marriage, where she'd made plans to betray me, where she'd brought her lover into our bed. Soon, everyone would know that the boring software engineer could have afforded a mansion in the hills, a fleet of luxury cars, vacations to places Adrian Blake could only dream of visiting. But more importantly, they'd know that Clara had thrown it all away for a man whose empire was built on borrowed money and empty promises. The trap was set. Now all that remained was watching it spring shut.
The mediation conference room looked like every corporate meeting space I'd ever seen. Sterile white walls, a long mahogany table, and windows that offered a view of downtown traffic 20 floors below. But there was electricity in the air that morning, the kind of tension that comes right before everything changes forever. Clara arrived 15 minutes early with her lawyer, Patricia Wells, and I had to admit they made an impressive team. Clara wore a tailored black suit that I'd never seen before, probably bought with Adrian's credit card, and Patricia carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd handled hundreds of these cases and expected this one to be routine. What made the scene almost comical was that they kept glancing at the empty chairs where my legal team should have been. In their minds, I was a middle-class software engineer who probably couldn't afford top-tier representation. They were expecting some overworked public defender or a strip mall attorney who'd push me toward a quick settlement. Instead, at exactly 2 p.m., Naomi Park walked through the door followed by 2 associates and a paralegal wheeling a cart loaded with banker's boxes. I watched Clara's confident expression flicker as she took in Naomi's designer suit, her team's obvious competence, and the sheer volume of documentation they'd brought. Patricia Wells's eyebrows rose slightly as she recognized one of the city's most expensive divorce attorneys. "Miss Wells," Naomi said pleasantly as she settled across from them, "shall we begin?" Patricia recovered quickly, shuffling through her papers. "Certainly. This should be fairly straightforward. We're looking at a standard division of marital assets for a middle-income household. My client is seeking 50% of all marital property plus reasonable spousal support given the disparity in earning potential." "Disparity in earning potential," Naomi repeated with interest. "Could you elaborate on that?" Clara leaned forward, speaking for the first time since we'd sat down. "Ethan makes $90,000 a year as a software engineer. I make $65,000 in marketing, but I have significantly more growth potential in my field." She said it with such certainty, such complete confidence in her assessment of our respective financial situations. I almost felt bad for what was about to happen. Almost. "I see," Naomi said, making a note. "And you've based your asset division request on Mr. Lee's alleged income of $90,000 annually?" "Alleged?" Patricia's voice sharpened. "Miss Park, Mr. Lee's income is well documented.
We have 8 years of tax returns showing consistent earnings in that range." Naomi smiled, the kind of smile that made her legendary in family court. "Ms. Wells, those tax returns show Mr. Lee's W-2 income from his employment as a software engineer. They don't show his other sources of revenue." The room went very quiet. I could see Clara and Patricia exchanging glances, suddenly uncertain. "Other sources of revenue?" Patricia asked carefully. "Business income, investment returns, intellectual property royalties, cryptocurrency holdings, stock options, partnership distributions." She paused between each item like she was reading a grocery list. "Shall I continue?" Clara's face had gone pale. "What are you talking about? Ethan doesn't have business income. He works for TechFlow Solutions." "Actually," I spoke for the first time since sitting down, "I haven't worked for TechFlow in 3 years. I've been consulting independently while focusing on my primary business venture." "What business venture?" Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. Naomi opened the first banker's box and withdrew a thick folder. "Cipher Shield Security Systems. Mr. Lee is the founder and majority shareholder of a blockchain security company that currently holds contracts with 6 Fortune 500 companies and the Department of Defense." She slid a document across the table. "This is Cipher Shield's most recent valuation, conducted by Morrison and Associates for potential acquisition discussions with Microsoft." Patricia Wells opened the folder, scanned the first page, and went completely white. The number at the bottom of the valuation summary was clear and unambiguous. $127 million. This can't be right," Clara stammered, grabbing the document from her lawyer. "Ethan drives a Honda Civic. We live in a 3-bedroom house in Millbrook. We shop at Target." "Yes," I said quietly, "we did all those things because I chose to live modestly while building something substantial, something you never bothered to ask about or show interest in." Naomi was already pulling more documents from the boxes. Bank statements showing Mr. Lee's personal accounts, investment portfolios managed by Goldman Sachs, real estate holdings in 3 states, patent registrations for blockchain security protocols, cryptocurrency wallets, corporate partnership agreements. She spread the papers across the table like she was dealing cards, each one representing another revelation that Clara's world wasn't what she'd believed it to be. The preliminary calculation puts Mr. Lee's personal net worth at approximately $73.4 million. Of course, we'll need to determine which assets are marital property and which were acquired through business entities established before the marriage or through intellectual property developed prior to their relationship. Clara was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. $73 million? That's impossible. We never lived like... I mean, if you had that kind of money, why didn't we live like millionaires? I finished for her. Because I wanted to know who I was married to. I wanted to know if my wife loved me or loved what I could provide for her. The implications were hitting Clara in waves. I could see her mind racing, calculating, trying to understand what this meant for her divorce settlement. 50% of $73 million was $36 million, Patricia Wells whispered, apparently doing the same math. "You're telling me my client is entitled to $36 million? "Actually," Naomi said pleasantly, "that's where this gets interesting. You see, most of Mr. Lee's assets were acquired through business entities established before the marriage or through intellectual property developed prior to their relationship." She pulled out another folder. "But there's something else we need to discuss. The reason for the divorce." Clara found her voice again, though it was shakier than before. "We grew apart. We wanted different things." "Is that so?" Naomi opened the folder and withdrew a transcript. "Because we have evidence suggesting otherwise. Miss Lee, are you familiar with Adrian Blake?" The blood drained from Clara's face so fast I thought she might pass out. Patricia Wells looked confused, clearly out of the loop on her client's personal life. I don't see how that's relevant, Clara managed. It's relevant because adultery affects asset division in this state, particularly when the adultery is accompanied by plans to defraud the innocent spouse during divorce proceedings. She slid the transcript across the table. This is a recording of conversations between Miss Lee and Mr. Blake, recorded in Mr. Lee's home during one of their encounters. Would you like me to read some highlights? Clara was shaking her head, but Naomi was already reading. When are you going to tell him? That's Mr. Blake speaking. And here's your response, Miss Lee. Soon. I just need to figure out how to maximize what I can get from the divorce. He's boring, but he's got decent savings and half this house is worth something. Patricia Wells was frantically taking notes, clearly realizing her straightforward divorce case had just become a nightmare. There's more, Naomi continued. Baby, once you're with me, money won't be an issue. I've got 3 deals closing this quarter that'll set us up for years. That's Mr. Blake making promises about his financial stability. I watched Clara's expression crumble as she realized how thoroughly she'd been caught, but Naomi wasn't finished. We also have documentation of Miss Lee's public statements about leaving her husband for someone more financially successful. Social media posts, witness statements from friends and neighbors, receipts for expensive purchases made with Mr. Blake's credit cards. She paused, letting the weight of evidence settle over the room. The pattern is clear. Miss Lee committed adultery, planned to conceal it during divorce proceedings, intended to make false claims about marital assets, and publicly humiliated her husband while flaunting her affair. In this state, that affects both asset division and spousal support. Clara finally found her voice again. How much? How much what, Miss Lee? How much do I get? I exchanged glances with Naomi, then smiled. Well, given the adultery, the attempted fraud, and the fact that most assets are separate property, we're prepared to offer you exactly what you brought to the marriage 8 years ago. Which is nothing, I said quietly. You brought nothing, Clara. No assets, no savings, no investments. You brought nothing, and that's what you'll leave with. The silence in the room was deafening. Clara stared at me like I'd slapped her. Patricia Wells was frantic. Judge Eleanor Graves had a reputation for running her courtroom like a military operation. Precise, efficient, and utterly intolerant of theatrics. When I walked into Family Courtroom 3B that Thursday morning, she was already reviewing documents with the focused intensity of someone who'd seen every variation of human greed and deception over her 23 years on the bench. Clara sat at the plaintiff's table with Patricia Wells, and I noticed immediately that her designer confidence from the mediation had been replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. She kept glancing at her phone, probably waiting for word from Adrian about his 3 major deals that I'd mentioned. What she didn't know was that Tom's follow-up research had revealed that all 3 deals had fallen through, leaving Adrian Blake approximately 48 hours away from financial collapse. But that revelation would have to wait. Today was about Clara and me, and 8 years of marriage that had ended with her signing divorce papers while taunting me about my supposed inadequacy. Your Honor, Patricia Wells began as soon as Judge Graves called the session to order. This case involves the dissolution of an 8-year marriage between my client, Clara Lee, and the defendant, Ethan Lee. We're seeking equitable distribution of marital assets and reasonable spousal support based on the parties' respective earning capacities. Judge Graves nodded without looking up from her files. And what are those respective earning capacities, Ms. Wells? My client earns $65,000 annually in marketing. Mr. Lee earns $90,000 as a software engineer. Given his higher income and my client's career sacrifices during the marriage, we believe spousal support is warranted. I see. Judge Graves finally looked up, her sharp eyes moving between the two legal teams. Ms. Park, how does your client respond to these claims? Naomi stood with the kind of calm confidence that comes from holding all the winning cards. Your Honor, we dispute virtually every factual assertion made by the plaintiff. Mr. Lee's actual earning capacity is substantially higher than claimed. The marriage ended due to the plaintiff's adultery, and there were no career sacrifices that would justify spousal support. Substantially how? Perhaps it would be easier to show than tell, Your Honor. Naomi gestured to her associates, who began setting up a laptop and projection screen. With the court's permission, we'd like to present a comprehensive overview of Mr. Lee's actual financial position. Judge Graves leaned back in her chair with the expression of someone settling in for an interesting show. Permission granted. Ms. Wells, any objection? Patricia Wells looked uncertain. Your Honor, we weren't provided with this presentation in advance. Because the plaintiff's legal team didn't ask the right questions during discovery. Everything we're about to show was available through standard financial disclosure requests. They chose to rely on assumptions instead. The first slide appeared on the screen. Cipher Shield Security Systems. Company Overview. Your Honor, Mr. Lee is not simply a software engineer earning $90,000 annually. He is the founder and majority shareholder of Cipher Shield Security Systems, a blockchain security company that has revolutionized cryptocurrency protection protocols. I watched Clara's face as the presentation unfolded. Each slide brought a new revelation that shattered her assumptions about the man she had married. Corporate partnerships with major banks, government contracts worth tens of millions of dollars, patent portfolios that generated recurring royalty income, investment returns that exceeded most people's annual salaries. The company's most recent third-party valuation, conducted by Morrison & Associates for potential acquisition discussions, places Cipher Shield's value at $127 million. Mr. Lee owns 68%. Judge Graves was taking notes now, occasionally glancing at Clara with an expression that suggested she was beginning to understand the scope of what was happening in her courtroom. Additionally, Naomi clicked to the next slide, Mr. Lee maintains substantial personal investments separate from his business holdings: real estate, cryptocurrency portfolios, stock options, and intellectual property rights. The numbers on the screen kept getting larger. Real estate holdings, $8.3 million. Investment accounts, $12.7 million. Cryptocurrency wallets, $15.2 million. Patent royalties, $3.8 million annually. Clara made a small choking sound. Patricia Wells was frantically scribbling notes, probably calculating how much her contingency fee would be worth if Clara was entitled to half of what they were seeing. In total, Naomi said, advancing to a summary slide, Mr. Lee's verified net worth is $73.4 million. The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Graves set down her pen and stared at the screen, then at me, then at Clara. 73 million, she repeated slowly. And Mrs. Lee, you were unaware of this? Clara's voice came out as barely a whisper. I had no idea. He never said. We lived like we were middle class. We shopped at Target. Because Mr. Lee chose to live modestly. He maintained the same lifestyle throughout their marriage, never flaunting his success, never making purchases that would reveal his true wealth. Judge Graves was studying Clara with the sharp attention of someone who'd spent decades evaluating human nature. Mrs. Lee, if you believed your husband earned $90,000 annually, what prompted you to seek a divorce? She glanced desperately at her lawyer, but Patricia was still staring at the financial projections in apparent shock. We grow apart. We wanted different things. Different things, such as, I wanted someone more ambitious, more successful. The irony of that statement hung in the air like smoke. Judge Graves made another note. Miss Park, do you have evidence of that adultery? Naomi nodded to her associate who queued up an audio file. Your Honor, we have recordings of Mrs. Lee and her paramour, Adrian Blake, engaged in intimate relations in the marital home, along with conversations detailing their plans for the divorce proceedings. I object, Patricia Wells finally found her voice. Those recordings may have been obtained illegally. The recordings were made by Mr. Lee in his own home. Mrs. Lee brought her lover into the marital residence and had no reasonable expectation of privacy while committing adultery. Judge Graves considered this. I'll allow it. Play the relevant portions. What followed was 3 minutes of Clara's voice, crystal clear through the courtroom's audio system, discussing her plans to leave her boring, unsuccessful husband for Adrian Blake, a man who could give her the lifestyle she deserved. Her contemptuous description of me, her casual dismissal of our marriage, and her calculations about what she could extract from the divorce, all of it played out in excruciating detail. When the audio stopped, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Mrs. Lee, Judge Graves said finally, you committed adultery with Mr. Blake based on your belief that he was more financially successful than your husband? Clara nodded miserably. And you made public statements about leaving your husband for someone who could better provide for you? Another nod. And during these recorded conversations, you discussed strategies for maximizing your financial gain in divorce proceedings? Your Honor, I didn't know about all this money if I had known. If you had known your husband was worth $73 million, you wouldn't have committed adultery? Judge Graves' tone was sharp with disbelief. Clara's silence was answer enough. Judge Graves turned to Naomi. Miss Park, what is your client seeking in terms of asset division? Given the adultery, the attempted fraud, and the fact that most of Mr. Lee's wealth derives from separate property, we believe Mrs. Lee is entitled to a minimal settlement, enough to help her transition to independent living, but nothing that would reward her betrayal. How minimal? $50,000, final and complete settlement of all marital claims. Clara shot to her feet. $50,000? Your Honor, that's impossible. I was married to him for 8 years. I'm entitled to half of everything. Judge Graves fixed her with a stare that could have frozen fire. Mrs. Lee, you were married to a man worth $73 million, and you left him for a real estate broker who, according to the evidence presented, is currently facing financial collapse due to failed business deals. She consulted her notes. You committed adultery in the marital home, publicly humiliated your husband, and made recorded statements about your intention to extract maximum financial benefit from divorce proceedings based on assets you believed to be far smaller than they actually are. Judge Graves paused, letting her words sink in. In this state, adultery affects both asset division and spousal support. The fact that you left your marriage specifically seeking greater financial security with another man, only to discover that